Hello and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. So today I'm going to talk about the last 10 global dividend ETFs for European and Swiss investors. In two previous videos I already talked about 9 and 3 ETFs. So today I'm going to talk about these 10 global ETFs which distribute a dividend. And this brings the total then on 12 global ETFs which distribute dividends in the European region. And I'm not going to talk about the swap-based ETFs, and that's the LYWLD from Amundi and the LYQE from Lixor. So those two I'm not going to discuss. And then 20 of those 22 are buyable in Switzerland and 2 are not. And if you want to check out the other 12, so you can look at the two previous videos, and not the previous one, but the two before that one. And these are the 12 ETFs that I mentioned in those videos. So the first one, HMWO, it's from HSBC. It's the MSCI World UCITS ETF, and it's in US dollar. You will see it in a moment. So again, all the time the ISIN code is here, as well as the tickers from the other stock markets when there are other stock markets available, that is, and if they have other tickers symbols on those stock exchanges. The total expense ratio of this one, it's really low, 0.15%. I'm going to show another one which is really low in a few minutes, but this one is low as well. The currency on the SIX stock exchange is US dollar, and momentarily it's 29.84. And the currency of the dividend is also in US dollar, and it tracks 1,387 holdings, and there is quite a lot invested in it. So 5.7 billion is invested in this ETF. It's a sampling type ETF, and if you look at the performance, so since its inception, 172% up, so that's really nice. And also, yeah, the 1 year, 3 year and 5 years results are really nice. And it gives 4 dividends in a year, so quarterly payments, and it pays in the month January, April, July and October, and that are the same months as my ETF, the SDGPX, where I invest our money in. So it's one of the two ETFs that give a dividend in these quarters, in these months. And the dividend yield, it's only 1.69%, but when you look at the return, that's much higher. So it always depends on what you're looking for. So as you see here, it's not financial advice that I'm giving, I'm just giving an overview, and you yourself have to decide in which ETF you want to put your money. If you choose ETFs, of course, you can also choose stocks. But ETFs, as you know, are more my cup of tea because it's diversified from the get-go. And then the dividends over the last year. So you see it's a really nice distribution, and yeah, you can't say a lot about it. It's always the same around July. So June, July, it's always the highest payout, and then around January it's the lowest, and then April and October they are more like the same for those 2 quarters. So But this one, it's a really nice distribution. So yeah, up to the next one. IWRD. It's from iShares, the MSCI World UCITS ETF. So it tracks the same index. It has a total expense ratio of 0.50, so it's really expensive for iShares. I don't know why it is that high for this ETF. For iShares, normally they are a bit lower. So yeah, but iShares is always a bit on the higher side, just like UBS. But this one is it's exceptionally high, 0.50. It notes in US dollar as well, so 63.62 right now, and the dividend is also paid out in US dollar. It tracks 1,510 companies, so it's always more or less the same when you see the MSCI World UCITS index being tracked by the ETF. So it's always around 1,520 holdings. So this one has 1,510, 5.5 billion almost invested in it, and it's also a sampling ETF. The performance is quite nice as well, so almost 140% up since inception, and the last 5 years it's performing more or less the same as the previous one. It gives also quarterly dividends, and this time it's March, June, September, and December when it pays out those dividends, and the dividend yield is 1.4%. And once again, more or less the same. So June, again the highest one, but also nice dividends. FGQD from Fidelity, the Global Quality Income UCITS ETF. So you have a total expense ratio of 0.40. It's available in Swiss francs on the 6, but also in US dollars. So there are 3 ETFs that I discussed today that have double notation on the 6, so with 2 currencies. So if you say, yeah, I find more ETFs on the Swiss stock market, but it has the same ticker as here, please don't write anything in the chat. But if you do find another one, so the 22 that I mentioned together with the 2 swaps in the beginning of the video, if you do find another one, please let me know in the comments down below, so that I can take a look at it and also include it in my global dividend ETFs that I track. So not from America, but from the European region. So yeah, it would be great if you help me with the work a bit, because I put a lot of time in finding all these ETFs, but maybe I overlooked some. So it would be nice if you know one that I haven't mentioned yet. The dividend is also paid out in US dollar for FGQD. It tracks 253 companies, and it has 401 million invested in it. It's a full replicated ETF, and yeah, it's more or less the performance like the SGPX ETF that my wife and I invest our money in. It's also quarterly paying ETF, and the dividend yield is 2.9%. And yeah, here it's an exception. So here it's in May that the highest dividend is paid out. But once again, yeah, it looks a low amount, but the price, of course, of this ETF is on the low hand. And you know that I like that, but here the problem is it's Swiss francs to US dollar. But you can also take, of course, the US dollar to US dollar. It has the same valor number for the tax return that you need to fill in here in Switzerland. So if you get US dollar back and you invest in the other one that notes in US dollar, you buy the same ETF in fact, but it's easier to fill in your tax return. FGQC is up next. That's the Fidelity Global Quality Income UCITS ETF, and it's hedged towards the Swiss franc. So it's only available on the Swiss Stock Exchange, so on the SIX. It's 6.202 that it notes today, but if you look at the previous one, it's the same. It was not hedged. It doesn't have the same price because it's started on a later date, and that's why the prices aren't the same, but the dividend yield and stuff, they are completely the same. So the currency of the dividend, it's also Swiss franc, so that's why it's hedged towards Swiss franc. And that's really interesting, of course. So it's the only global tracking dividend distributing ETF that you can invest Swiss francs in and get Swiss francs in return. So if you are interested in this one is an ETF for you. So the holdings it tracks, it's the same. The only difference with the previous one is the amount invested in it, so only 21 million, so 20 times less more or less compared to the previous one. Full replication one as well, and it started in 2020 in June. So for the 5 years there isn't a result yet, but the 3 years and the 1 year it's quite nice, and it pays out quarterly, and yeah, the same dividend yield. And when you look at the paid out values of the dividend, it's also in May that the highest amount is paid out. So that's also nice, just before the vacation period coming on, that you get your highest payout. So the XDWL, that's an ETF from Xtrackers MSCI World UCITS ETF. So it's the same index as the first two that I discussed today. It has a total expense ratio of 0.12%, so that is in fact the cheapest one for today. It's in Swiss francs, 70.90 right now, and the dividend is paid out in US dollar. It tracks, yeah, it's the MSCI World Index, so again 1,530 companies, 1.8 billion invested in this ETF, and it's a sampling one. Again, nice performance, 84% up since its inception in 2015. Pays out quarterly in February, May, August, and November. And the dividend yield, it's the lowest one up till now, so 1.27%. But it makes that up, of course, with the total return. And then again, more or less the same, and nice dividend payouts. So the WRD USA from UBS, it also tracks the MSCI World Index, and you see here that's a huge problem when I talk about the ticker symbols that are used in Switzerland. This one has 4 other tickers on the European stock market, so you will definitely need the easing code for this one. And then the total expense ratio is 0.30%, which is a really nice total expense ratio for UBS. The Yeah, it has two notations on the SIX, so one in Swiss francs and one in US dollar, and momentarily it's quite high for the Swiss franc, 265.4. I think US dollar, that means it's around 295 US dollar, so it's also quite high. The dividend is always paid out in US dollar, and yeah, again, 1,512 companies where it's invested its money in, and almost 1 billion invested in it, full replication, and quite nice performance of this ETF as well. And that's the thing with UBS. They hardly have any ETFs that pay out more than 2 dividends in a year. You have a few with ETF that are bonds related, and they can give 12 dividends in a year. I think they have 2 or 3 like that. But in bonds, I'm not that interested in investing my money in an ETF that tracks bonds. I rather buy obligations from companies directly. That's the companies that I like then. So almost always it's in February and August that they pay out the dividend, and the dividend yield is 2.9%, so that's not bad at all. And then you have Vivi. It's from Vanguard, and it's the FTSE Developed World UCITS ETF that is distributing the, how do you say it, distributing dividends. Also total expense ratio of 0.12%. So Vanguard is also known for having a low expense ratio, so also one of the cheapest one that I'm discussing today. And it's notating right now at 76.74 Swiss francs, and the dividend is paid out in US dollars as well. It tracks 2,169 companies, and it has 1.8 billion invested in it, and it's a sampling type of ETF. And since 2014 it went up 90%, and in the last year 7%. So again, it's a more performance oriented fund and not really a dividend yield one. So the dividend yield only 1.8%. Well, it's nice, of course, because you get it extra, and it pays out quarterly in the months that the most ETFs pay out their dividends. So March, June, September, and December. And yeah, nice amounts that are being paid out each quarter. So really nice. Almost double in June. And then V3AL. So sometimes it's V3AM. Also of Vanguard. And this one has the ESG label. And it's all cap UCITS ETF distributing. The total expense ratio is a bit higher, the double of the previous one of Vanguard, 0.24. The current price on the Swiss stock market is 4.369 Swiss francs. So you know why I like ETFs with a low amount that you have to pay to have one share here in Switzerland. So you can start compounding faster. The dividends are paid out in US dollar. It's tracking the most amount of companies of all the ETFs, so all the global dividend distributing ETFs that I mentioned in all the videos that I made up till now. So 5,838 companies and only 226 million invested in it. It's a sampling type, and why it's only 226? It's because it started in 2021. So a really bad time to start an ETF, of course. And you see it's still in the minus, but the last year it's more or less the same as the previous one, so up almost 7%. So this one is certainly going to get more invested money in it because it's a really good ETF. It distributes 4 quarterly dividends as well. and the dividend yield is 1.55% right now. And once again, the numbers here are lower because of also the price is lower, but when you look at the dividend yield, that's more relevant then compared to all the other ETFs. Then TSWE, it's from Vanek. It's after TDIF, another ETF from Vanek. So Vanek has also dividend distributing ETF for real estate. You know that I mentioned that one when I was talking about the core satellite strategy that my wife and I are going to follow. So there are only 3 ETFs from the Netherlands that give dividends. Here that note on the SIX stock exchange, and now I mentioned them all 3 on my channel. So I'm a big fan of Vanek. They do a great job in managing ETFs. So the total expense ratio 0.20% as well. So it's a really nice TER that they have. It's 26.75 Swiss francs right now, and the dividend is paid out in euro because it's a Dutch company, of course, Vanek. They pay out in euro. And the holdings it tracks are 256, and right now there is 570 million invested in this ETF, and it's a full replication one. The performance since its inception with 100%, that's really nice. So when you know the rule of 72, you know that right now they are up almost 7.2% with annual. So yeah, 100%. That means it doubles in more or less 10 years. So 72 divided by 10 is 7.2%. So that's a really nice, how do you say it, annual annual performance of this fund. And it pays out like the other Vanek, so the TDIF ETF, it pays out in the same months every quarter, and the dividend yield is 2.3%. And this fund really keeps it simple, so only 2 numbers behind the comma or behind the dot. It's 0.12, 0.07, 0.28, and 0.17 that it paid out the past year. So I like that. Keep it simple and not with 6 numbers behind the dot, because that's really hard to calculate every time, and you always lose a bit of money with rounding up or rounding down. So it's really nice to see easy numbers for dividends. Then CBVS from Amundi. So the other one, it's a swap based. It's a really nice one that's swap based, but swap is not really my kind of tea. So Amundi multi-asset portfolio usage ETF distributing. I included it because it's a global fund, so it invests globally, but it's more like a pension fund. So you have also a multi-asset portfolio, offensive and defensive. This one is in fact the average one. I don't want to include the other 2 because yeah, I I found it hard to include this one too, but I didn't want to not mention Amundi, because Amundi they do a great job in managing ETFs as well. So total expense ratio 0.45%. Its price right now is 133 Swiss francs on the SIX stock exchange, and you can also have the euro version. So how much is that? I think it's 138 right now. plus minus. And the dividend is paid out in euro as well, just like the previous one of Van Eck. It tracks 1,482 companies in its index, and it has 170 million Swiss francs invested in it. And yeah, the performance, it's not that great. That's also why I was hesitating to include this one, but for as showing respect for Amundi, I'm still including it here. And then it only gives one dividend per year. You know that I'm not a fan of that either. If you want to compound your dividends, it's better to have 4. And if it's a really good ETF, you can go down to 2, but 4 is what I want to see. The dividend yield is 2.07. And yeah, it's a nice dividend, of course, but only one. And this is then the final overview of the 22 global ETFs with dividends for European and Swiss investors. So the violet one or purple ones are not on the SIX stock exchange. So you won't find FTWD or QDVW on the SIX, but they are on other stock markets, especially on the German stock markets. And then the FGQC, that one is only on the SIX stock markets, so you won't find it in any other European or UK stock market. And as I mentioned in my previous 2 videos where I talk about global ETFs that distribute dividends, SD, IV, I really don't like it. It gives 12.65% dividend yield, but if you look at the performance, it went down 32% since its inception, and its inception is yeah, I think it's 1 year and a half, 2 years that it exists, this fund, so losing 32% and continuing going down, that's not great, so stay away from SDIF. And I changed my last slide for the video, so please hit that subscribe button. If you want, also hit the like button, and you can press the notification icon as well. That's not necessary, of course, but if you would like to hit those first 2, that would be a great help to me. So thank you for watching, and see you the next time on my YouTube channel. Bye!